Hello, in this video we're gonna see how you can work with MCP servers in the Brutor gateway. We're gonna focus on the non-auth ones. So the server that I'm gonna demo with is going to be just plain access, no authentication via API key or OAuth is going to be required. I'm going to have a separate video for that. So what we're going to learn is how can you configure MCP servers, both those that you develop yourself, have running locally, how can you configure them in the system, and then see how calls are proxied through the gateway. View the usage, proxy logs and everything. We're going to also cover a little bit of guardrails, how they are kind of implemented in the system. If you want more stuff around authenticated MCP servers like OAuth, services that require OAuth, I'm going to have a separate video for that. So we're going to go through how you, if you have your own MCP server running locally, how can you connect that to the gateway? How can you get the calls go through the gateway proxy? How can you view usage and proxy logs, etc. Now, the first thing we're going to do is just use the gateway to register, as I said, our own locally running MCP server. Let's say you developed an MCP server. Now you want to govern and manage it via the Brutor gateway. How do you actually do that? So every tool call through this server is governed, logged, and meet. In this demo, we're going to use a simple weather server. It basically has a tool, get current weather, and it takes a city as a parameter. So you can say what's the current weather in London, and it's going to contact this external services. This does not require an API key or anything. You can just ask them, and they will take that response and returns that as the tool response. This server is available for you to download also and clone and start up. I'll show you how that works. The thing is, now you will be adding authorization via the gateway. So to get access to this server via gateway, you will register it, and then you will assign it to a specific resource group. Basically, a resource group consists of one or more AI resources such as models, AI models, MCP servers, etc. So you need to register it there, and then any API key that's been configured on that group, or any gateway user or member, you can then access that MCP server. We are not only going to do this running a local server, we're also going to see how you can import MCP servers from our MCP catalog. And there we're also going to focus on the non-auth, such as Amazon Knowledge Base. We're just going to import that one and see how that works. When you import via our catalog, it does a lot of stuff for you. So it creates this MCP server entity, and then it also creates for you an access configuration, basically what group is going to access that server. That's all that for you. When we register a local weather server like this that we build, we have to create an MCP server entity and an access configuration. So we'll see how you do all of those things. So how can you get your hands on this demo server? You can go here to github.com/brutor-ai/brutorweather MCP server, and then you just grab the clone URL, and then you do git clone and then paste that in, and then you have it because it's public, so you can just download it. There is information here how to start it. I'll show you quickly how to start it here now. Then let's say you have cloned it here into this directory. Let's see if I already have an environment. No. Then after you clone, just do USync. It's gonna create then .virtual environment. Now you can actually start weather server, and it's going to run. It's going to listen to port 3012. So that's important to remember now. So this runs now locally here. Like imagine you've developed a server and you want to test it with a gateway. And so I can actually now try it out with Curve. For example, I can ask for a session by invoking the initialize method. That's the one you first first invoking this MCP protocol. The MCP server is then going to respond with a session ID that you can use for further calls. So I can see I got a response, and this is the message ID I need to use. And then I can just use that when I ask for tools list. So here, tools list. Most of these commands and stuff are in the README file. So now you can see I'm accessing server here, localhost 3012. So now I should get info about the tool. So you can see I got that back here. Get current weather, description, and the args takes a city arg. So that seems to be up and running now. Now, how do we actually register that with the gateway? So all the stuff in Docker containers. So I'm logging in here. You can see the username and password here. This is basically a fresh install with one thing I've prepared. API keys for those AI models that you can see in another video, managing AI models, how to do all that stuff. Because we need at least one chat model if we want to try invoking this MCP server via the LLM tool code definitions and all that. Chat clients, Goose, for example. How do we register our MCP server in the gateway? So we got MCP servers here. They're part of the AI resources. So you can see under configuration here, we have MCP servers. There's a bunch of them coming pre-configured here. We don't need to worry too much. Quickly talk about what they are. Agent Skills is an MCP server that is implemented in the gateway. So there is no external MCP server running anywhere in a container or anything called Agent Skills. This implements Agent Skills execution and orchestration. So when you use an agent skill, it's actually implemented as a tool call, and this is what that server handles, and it's usually enabled by default when you install. There's a couple of examples of OAuth servers here, GitHub, HubSpot, Slack. And then we got one MCP server here that implements an MCP app. That's a special extension to the MCP standard where you can have a little UI inside an iframe returned from the MCP server. I'm going to have a special video about MCP app, MCP servers. Then we got another system built in MCP server, and this one is used when you want to do web search from our portal, for example, because if you use one of these AI models here via the API route, you don't have the latest web news, web search stuff available. So to handle that, we have this. The only thing you need to do to use this MCP server is it's disabled here because you need to actually configure it here. So search configuration. You can use Brave Search, for example, get a free up to $5 credit per month, and you just put the key here, and then you can enable that. I'll show that in a different video how to do that. That's the stuff we have. We're now going to add the weather MCP server. You can see here, add server. That's what we're going to do. And the top stuff here is just experimental stuff to be able to search in MCP registries. Basically importing configurations for where MCP servers are. So ours, we're going to call it weather server basically. Fetch weather current weather info for a specified city. You have to give the city that you are looking for. Now, what's the URL? That is the 3012, and it actually has /MCP as the endpoint for the MCP protocol. Now, what's going to happen if we do this? Remember, we're inside a Docker container. Is that going to work? Nope. If you do localhost from inside a Docker container, can't reach out. You need a special. So this is a special kind of host name that you need to use to get outside the Docker container, to reach outside host.docker.internal. You do that. Now you can see it hit the server. You can also see that from, let's see, this means it's found a server, it's accessible, it discovered the tools and other capabilities. It does capability discovery automatically if it's not using authentication. So if it's no auth, it will discover that for you. Then we're going to add an icon in a bit, but that's done in a separate step. So what you can do more also, you can set timeouts and stuff. Enable server, allow MCP apps, talk about that later, and OpenSSE's listener stream. So MCP's optional server to client event channel. So it can the server can call back, like event, call back and tell you things has happened to receive notifications such as tools list change. So for example, if the MCP server, the tools that are available have changed, then you can get information about that. We're just going to do the default for that. So create server. So now we got the server here. Let's add nice icon to it also. And we can upload an icon, weather icon. So now we got the icon. It's nice from different places to see the icon. And now you can also see tools, so you can click on that. So you see get current weather is the tool that was discovered. So that's the case for all these that are non-auth. As soon as you've authenticated with, for example, GitHub and done OAuth, it adds the discovered capabilities for you afterwards. Can you actually access this server now from anywhere? No. This is just the first step. You've now defined your MCP server. Next step is to give resource groups or people or applications, agents, etc. access to it. You do that via resource groups. And when you install, you have one default resource group. And you can see all MCPs are part, all models are part. So you just need the weather server to pop up here, and then the members, the trial user, can access that. And the way we do that is we go to MCP server access and access configuration. These two are for OAuth servers. Now you can see there is no access configuration for the weather server. So we just need to pick MCP server, weather server, because there's no auth. It doesn't require you to add an OAuth app. We're just going to do weather. You can customize the name here also. Fetch weather info for a specified. And this is the important part. Here's where you assign it to who should have access. And then we create that. Now we have the web server here, and it's assigned to the default group. So if I go back to that group, I can see that MCP server has actually popped up in there. So you can see here now the weather info enabled. You can see you have one get current weather available. There is no filters active here. You can, if you have multiple tools, for example here, you can say enabled, approval required, disabled. So you could actually already here say these two should not be available in this resource group. So that's a way of filtering that. Now we're just gonna go with what we got. What can you do now? The MCP server is now configured, so it's part of resource group, and this member has access to that, so we should be able to actually use it. So now I'm going to the bundled portal that comes with the trial download. You can see here data access. It automatically now actually connected because I had this setting auto connect to non-auth service, so that if it hasn't connected when you do it, that's the reason. So now it is connected. There is a possibility to filter here also, to filter, turn on and on these get current weather and other tools, and you can see the map has show location and stuff. And skills, there are skill hello world and create. To test this, we need to go to chat. We can see models here. We have a bunch available. They all have API keys that I've configured. So I need to select the chat, and then you can see I have all those tools. So now I can ask, what is the weather in London right now? Now it's assembling all the tools available, sending that to the LLM. It picks this as a good tool to figure out what weather is like right now in London. And the portal has built in, so it will require you to approve tool call. And you can either approve it just once or approve all. We can approve all. And it's now going to request that tool to be called, and then it will tell you what happened on the server side. So now you can go to default usage. You can now see get current weather has been called once. When you connect to all these 3 MCP servers, these calls goes on for each and every one of the servers to figure out what their capabilities are. And we already saw how you did initialize in the beginning from command line. Here are the different LLM models I'm using. You can see here exactly what's been used, total cost for everything, total MCP calls. If you want all the details of that MCP call, you go to proxy log. You see here current weather. You click view details and you can see everything that happened. The body, exactly what we were requesting, and the response, all the stuff. So everything is auditable here. That's all good and fun. I got this survey. How do I actually call it from command line then? With curl, can I do that? So you have to then go here and look at the endpoint. Endpoint is this now. So if I go to my command line here, and for example, if I wanted to do that call that I did before, tools list. So the endpoint should not be direct like here. This is direct, doesn't go through the proxy. Now I can do like that. That goes through the proxy. Will that work? Let's see what happens. You can see it's missing some vital things. First, you need to say what tenant you are targeting, but that's baked in. Tenant ID is baked into the bearer token. And what bearer token is that? The server doesn't require auth, as we've been talking about all the time. The gateway requires auth. You can't just hit the gateway with no auth. And how do you get a bearer token? You actually go to the group that should have the access, API keys, and then you do this. Let's call this one curl API key. It's shared, so it's not connected to a specific user in that group. And set expiry date. Now copy that key and put it somewhere, because you're not going to see that key anymore. Right, so we don't have the key. Now if we need to put in here -h authorization and bearer token. That work. So there you can see you just gotta add that authorization header. Bearer token contains all the stuff, the tenant ID and everything. So now we should have another proxy log for that if things are working right. You see tools list here. And we can see everything here. That's pretty cool. So that covers those bits. So we see if we can use it via our custom portal. We can use it via the API, REST API straight in, but we need a key to lock it down. So this is how you can actually manage API keys on a resource group level. Let's now say this gets drifted, this key. Instead of relying on some global key, you can then go in here, okay, revoke, create a new key, and sort it out to manage it properly. What if you have, you don't want to use the portal, you don't want to use command line, API. You have a chat client. Let's say you have Goose. So you want to use Goose to both do LLM access and MCP access to that MCP server. How can you do that? Two things you need to do. Settings. First, you need to configure AI provider. Add Brutor AI, the gateway. And this is the API URL. Where do you get that from? So you go to your installation here to the AI models, enable ones, and then you click proxy, and then you see that. Then you go back here, paste that in here, the whole thing, including chat completions, the endpoint. What API key do you think you need? Correct. You need the one we just created. Now, this is important also. You need to set one or more models that resource group has access to. So basically, you need to go here and models, so one of these. Let's do GPT-5.2, pick that one. Alright, so you set all this up and then you need to select that. Cool. And then you just do a test. Just to see if you configure the AI model side, the LLM side, correct. If it works, okay. Now, how can you be sure it works? You go back here as usual. So you will see more cores here then. And then if you really want to see exactly, you go here. You can see 5.2 completions done right now, etc. So now how do we get the MCP to work inside Goose? Similar to the provider. You go to extensions. You're going to add. I have already Brutor weather info. Let's see. So you need the endpoint. So we go to, again here. Need to go to MCP, weather, endpoint, copy. That's the endpoint for the MCP proxy part. See this unique identifier changes. And what bearer do you need, you think? Yes, correct. The one we used all the time that ties it to that group. So the budget and everything is logged for that group. Save. Now enable it. It's now enabled. So let's see what we got. What is the like in Copenhagen? We will see. So let's see. We could see that also, of course, here, proxy logs. And it might not have done it. Let's just, you can check here. Oh, I don't have it on. Obviously, you need to turn it on. It was simpler than I expected. What is the weather like in Berlin right now? Now you can see it's calling that tool. Going back. Refresh, current weather yet. Let's check it out. So here, Berlin, everything's good. And we should see more calls for that here. So you can see 2 calls now here. One from Goose and one from command line. Command line I didn't use, I just used tools list. What about, I mentioned MCP catalog. Now, there's loads of non-auth MCP servers publicly available on the internet. So it would make sense that we have configured them ahead of time so you don't have to mess about with all this stuff. Doing this one, doing this here with the weather. Aren't there a better way? You can click catalog here. Let's look at those that are just non-auth. So you can see there's loads of well-known servers that are online that you can just, if this says remote, meaning they are running somewhere remote, let's pick this one. You see how easy it's going to be to just bring it in here. So next, we're happy with that. Import is just going to smack it into the system. So if we look at the MCP servers now, it's already done. Everything is configured. Even the tools discovered. MCP server access, already done. By default, it just attaches it to a default group. When you start making more groups and stuff, you will do a little bit more assigning of groups and stuff. This one is pretty much ready to use because you can see if you go to MCP, it's there. If we now go to data access, connect, shut display, you can put that here, then go back. You can see what the information was that the tool call had. And then you see what the LLM extracted from that. What is Amazon S3? Let's see if it uses tool or if it just does well known what that is. Sometimes it just returns it from what it knows, been trained on the model. Sometimes it just calls the tool. Let's see. Oh, it figures out, okay, I have tools for it. So it's going to use search documentation. So it's now calling that, got the response. It's processing your request and it's giving me stream back the results. So that covers a lot of the stuff. There's just one more thing that's good to know. Caching. So you can see there's a response cache enabled by default. So how does that affect tool calls. Yes. So if you look at exact match, it uses Redis and it has to be an exact, like what is the capital of France? You have to ask that twice, exactly the same prompt. Then it will be returned from Redis the response Paris. Semantic cache, you could do what is the capital, and you forgot L, capital of France, then it's very similar and it will hit the quadrant vector database. That's why you needed that embeddings model to be enabled, because it uses that. If you go to exclusions, you can see exclude tool calls, because tool calls are usually manipulating data and the response might insert data, do stuff. So by default the system will not cache stuff, responses that has been based on a tool call. If you still want that, like for example a weather, get current weather is super bad example of caching, obviously, because it gets current weather, so it should definitely be excluded from cache. But if you have something else, you could go to tool caching. Now, because I turned on caching basically, you can go here and say AWS search documentation, you are allowed to cache that, but nothing else. So you can work with that. So now it's disabled basically. So when we were running, it was not caching anything. So that's good to know. There is another policy also that's good to know. Argument policies. You can create the... so there's two ways to do guardrails. You have parsing strings just straight up. So when you run input, MCP input to tool and tool response, and even registration of an MCP server, these checks will be run. Personal identifiable information. And it will check all this and they will be reducted. So you will just do searches or regex. Same for these things, ban words and stuff. However, now let's say you wanted to do something more syntax based, like select star from employee salary table. You want to prevent selections from salary table, then you almost have to parse the SQL and the whole tool response or tool query. How can you do that? Because that's not just parsing a string. You need to know what it is. You need to know the syntax. You can do that with argument policies. So you can create a policy, prohibit, select from salary table and so on. And then you will do MCP inbound tool call. Skill tool name, fetch from DB. Obviously like that. And then you will have SQL analyzer and so on. And then you will have rules and so on. I covered this in a different video. Just want to tell you about that's also possible to do guardrails based on abstract syntax tree. Basically, you parse the stuff into a syntax tree. That's pretty much it for non-auth MCP servers.